quadrupling. It's not 16, it's 32. So imagine you have 1,000 feet going to 1,000 gallons. How much friction loss is that? A shitload.
Scientific term.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to tell you, for example, that as a starting point, when we're watching that discharge pressure in our 5-inch, that your starting point is about 100 psi. Okay. When you look at your individual gauge for the large diameter discharge, we're going to try to maintain that, and that's a great place to start. If we're below, say, 1,250, that's usually the breakover point for spacing our engines. Remember, above 1,250, we want them no more than 500 feet apart. Beneath that, we can have them up to 1,000 feet, right? You can drop your entire 5-inch bed and have a source and an attack. If you look at your pump chart, I think the value for friction loss, if we're flowing 1,500 gallons per minute with 5-inch, it's about per section, I think it's like 18, right? So if we kind of, do some firefighter math, say it's about 20, right? And we have 500 feet between engines. If we're flowing 1,500 gallons per minute, that's 100 psi of pressure loss before it ever gets to the intake of the downstream engine. Agreed? And if we're really anchoring on that 100 psi, there's not going to be any pressure left by the time it gets there. Cool. All right. The other thing to bear in mind, if you remember back to hot session 1, what makes a centrifugal pump a wonderful frontline fire pump for what we do is the fact that you don't need to, it's able to take advantage of incoming pressure, right? Most of the pumps that we're accustomed to, you go buy a pond pump from Home Depot, or you look at a priming pump that we use, or some of our wildland pumps, they operate where every time the impeller turns, it's going to discharge a fixed amount of water. It doesn't matter how much pressure you have coming in. If you want more water, you got to make it turn faster. Remember that? So that would be analogous to somebody starting over there, rolling a chair to me, right? And before I send it on, I stop it, I turn it around, and I push it. Okay? Every time the pump turns, it's a set amount of pressure and it's a set amount of water. On the other hand, with a centrifugal pump, we talked a little bit about slippage. Do you remember that weird term from an old textbook? Refers to the amount of water that can slip past the impeller from the intake side to the discharge side of the pump. Okay? With a centrifugal pump, you can have 100% slippage. The example being that if we go out, we take one of these fire engines, attach it to a hydrant, open the hydrant, open the intake, open a discharge, water will flow out of that discharge. Right? The engine's not even running. We don't have the pump engaged, but all of the water that's moving from that hydrant is able to get to the discharge side of the pump. Agreed? What makes that really useful for us is that we can use that hydrant pressure, right, or the pressure supplied by an engine upstream of us, and then we can just add energy, right? We add energy to that water column to boost it, to overcome the pressure loss that's already been there and move it on. So that's analogous to somebody rolling that chair to me. I step out of the way, I let it keep going, and I give it a push. Okay, I'm just adding energy to overcome that drag that it has sustained on its way to me. Everybody clear on that? So those are kind of the high level hydraulics concepts just to kind of bear in mind. So let's talk a little bit about recognizing the need and kind of setting up. Part of our instruction here has to do with laying 5-inch. Because of the logistical challenge of picking up 5-inch, reloading it between reps, we're not going to be able to get everybody, reps on laying 5-inch. We just don't have enough time in the day. But some of the ways that we might do it. Well, first of all, remember the 1,000 rule. Let's just talk about recognizing the need for it, right? Who can tell me what that is? It's a rule of thumb.
Every 1,000 feet, you have to have another engine or pump per se. Right?
Close. Yeah. If we're so half of that is if we're 1,000 feet or more between our source, right, and our fire, we need to have an engine pumping from the hydrant, right? It's a good practice to do that because it's just the distance involved. And the other half of that is what? I saw your, yeah, 1,000 or more gallons per minute. We want to have an engine at the hydrant. So we might be 300 feet away from our fire, right? But if we're at a Home Depot and it's through the roof and it's blowing and going, we need to have an engine at the hydrant supplying that attack engine. Okay, just for the pressure loss involved in the flow. All right. Some other things that can kind of clue us into it would be listening to the radio traffic, keeping our blinders kind of open and listening to what's going on. If you're starting to hear on the radio a lot of talk about fire extending beyond the compartment of origin, involving multiple buildings, you start to hear things escalating. It's a good idea maybe to cue your officer who's thinking about a bunch of other things that, hey, do you want to, if we're water supply, do you want us to set up at a hydrant or to initiate a big water supply operation, right? That's a command level decision, but it's absolutely okay for you to recognize it and make a suggestion. Cool. All right. So let's say, I'm going to draw just sort of my bad artistry here, but let's say that I'm looking at an overhead view of a small apartment complex like you might find in 18s or 22s area or really all over town. We got 6 buildings. Here's our street out here. So there's our street. Here's our parking area. We've got a plug here. And fire is showing in this building. Well, we're going to have blue fire. Yeah, we put such a good stop on it. Blue fire. All right. So there's our fire. All right. Windy night. Wind-driven conditions just right for rapid fire spread. So it's getting out of hand. First arriving engine on the scene is probably going to go straight to the scene, right? That's typically what we do. If you have the wherewithal and the time to recognize that, hey, we might need a big water supply, and you can lay 5-inch from the entrance to the scene, wonderful. Most of the time that first in engine is going to go to the scene because you can't necessarily see what you got, right? So you're going to go straight to the scene, see what's up. So let's say we've got engine 1 over here, and they've gone all the way there, and they're starting to deploy hand lines, right? Fire's getting pushed this way. It's starting to kind of expose and light off some of our other structures. So they've got their hands full, right? But they've declared that, hey, we've got fire in multiple buildings. Maybe they've gone defensive. Maybe they're kind of preparing to go defensive, but maybe they're calling for a second alarm. Hopefully they are. So that's going to cue us. We know that we need to get water supply set up. It should cue us to do that. Couple of ways, and one thing I'm going to stress is that we don't want to anchor too much on painting by the numbers, right? There are multiple ways to do this. If you read our policy, in a situation like this, to get a water supply from this hydrant to that engine, what kind of 5-inch lay does our policy love for a big water supply? If you look at A101 or you look at some of our other policies, what's that? I hear forward. Well, what's the one? There's one it loves more, reverse lay. Okay, and what are the advantages of doing a reverse lay?
You can drop things off at the scene before going back.
Okay. Okay, so you could drop a couple of personnel at the scene, maybe some equipment. What else? Yes.
Space, you're keeping units out of it.
keeping units out of the way.
You got an engine at the supply now at the hydrant.
Yeah, you get an engine to the hydrant really quickly, right? And it's has the added advantage of being the crew that recognized that there was a need, right? And now you've got that crew at the hydrant operating it, so your chances of success go up. So the idea being that, okay, engine 2 is coming in, and that crew recognizes the need for big water, so engine 2 is going to either drive forward, drop 5-inch, and carefully do a 3-point turn to get turned around, or maybe they back into the scene, right? They get turned around here, they back into the scene, drop 5-inch, and then they drive out at a controlled rate of speed through a clear path of travel, right, to the hydrant at the street. And then they establish a water supply, and we're rocking and rolling. Anything I'm leaving out? Any variables I'm leaving out? How about like the 200 vehicles that are parked, right, in the parking lot, probably occupying the center driveway, right? So they're effectively reducing the a 3-lane wide space to maybe a lane or a lane and a half. Okay, what else?
We have units.
Yeah, all the people coming in with us, right? That's the big one, because you're going nose to nose with everybody that's trying to pile into the scene. You've got APD that God love them, they try to help us out, right? They try to control access, but what do? They park their vehicle and then they get out to try to help, right? So now we have a vehicle that's blocking our ingress or our egress, and we don't know how to get it moved. So all of those things can happen. If you can do a reverse lay, I love a reverse lay. Okay, if you're in the parking lot of a big box store and you're able to get an engine to a hydrant and set it up with a reverse lay, it's awesome. It's just not practical a lot of the time. All right. So some other options that we have, when we talk about what a forward lay is, just to kind of clarify some terminology, and right now we're working on updating or creating a water supply policy that will really clarify and define some of this stuff. Luis and I are working on it right now. A forward lay, when we talk about what that is, traditionally that means we pull up to the hydrant, firefighters get out, they flush the hydrant, they get it set up, they confirm that it's a good hydrant, okay? And engine does a forward lay, laying 5-inch to the scene. Your firefighters stay there, they make the connection, and then once the call for water is received, you charge the hydrant, right? We've all done that at room and contents fires, or you've done it in the academy, traditional forward lay. In this instance, we might do something a little bit different, and we're kind of getting the terminology set, but you heard wrapping the hydrant. You heard that term? Another thing you might hear is like wrap and go. It's a forward lay, but a few of the steps removed. Okay, your firefighters jump out. They're not so much concerned with flushing that hydrant and getting it dressed, but they're going to wrap that hydrant with the 5-inch, and and the engine's just going to go. That firefighter's not going to stay there. They may follow the engine in and make sure that the 5-inch is getting moved out of the roadway so that other people can get in. But that engine's just going straight to the scene. Okay. So once they're here, they're pretty much committed. Okay. They can get out, they can break the 5-inch coupling, get it connected to our attack engine, and then what needs to happen? So we've got engine 2 coming in. They're here and they've wrapped this hydrant, but we need to make sure that something gets communicated to incoming units. What needs do we have? Yeah, we need to be really clear about that. Right now, we do not have standardized terminology about, hey, I need you to execute, whatever it is, computer blue, go, right? We don't have standard terminology for that. So plain English, and it may be you, right? If your officer's off doing officer stuff, whatever it is we do out there, right? It may be helpful for you to get on the radio and say, hey, third arriving engine, this is engine 2 driver. We've wrapped the hydrant at the entrance. We need you to stop there and set up and pump from the hydrant. Okay, give them very clear instructions. So your third arriving engine, let's say, can spot to that hydrant, connect to it, and then pump from the hydrant. Sound good? Another thing we can do, and you'll hear this term a lot, is a split lay. Okay, have y'all heard that? There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not we all understand what a split lay is, and we're working on getting everybody on the same page. And a split lay, infinite ways you can do it, but basically you're splitting the lay between two or more apparatus. Okay, so in the simplest example, let's say engine 2 comes to the entrance. They've recognized the need for big water. They drop a 5-inch coupling here at the entrance. They lay into the seam. So now they're committed. And they make a connection for engine 1. Again, communication is key. We ask the third arriving engine, we say, hey, we've laid 5-inch at the entrance to the complex. We need you to connect to our 5-inch and lay out to the hydrant, which is 100 feet to the north, or however we say it. And hopefully they hear that, they connect, and they do the equivalent of a reverse lay. And they connect to and pump from the hydrant. Okay, so we've split the lay between two engines. Can we hand jack hose? Can we do that for a split lay? What if this scene is just so congested that we can't even get an apparatus down there? Is there anything stopping us from just skull dragging like 300 feet of 5-inch to the entrance and then laying out to the hydrant and connecting it that way? Totally fine, right? It's still a split lay. So the only limit is our imagination as far as how we get that set up. So just bear that in mind. When we're laying 5-inch, great idea to have your window down so you can listen for the couplings dropping. And every time you do that, man, that's 100 feet, right? Nice, slow, controlled rate of speed. Get some reps in, okay, when you're able to. You will be laying 5-inch when you come back to test. Cool? Any questions so far about any of this? No? All right. I'm going to erase my beautiful drawing. Get into some of the nitty-gritty here. All right. So this may be familiar to everyone. Let's call this engine 1, engine 2, engine 3. Got our hydrant. We got our attack engine. And 3-engine relay. Every relay is going to have a source engine. Every relay is going to have an attack engine. We only want one pressure governed pump in the mix, but can we have multiple attack engines? Remember our little graphical journey that we took? Can we have more than one attack engine? That means we have more than one governed pump. But it's okay, right? Because if we use say a manifold or another device or maybe even the intake manifold of the attack engine, we can split that supply between two engines, and they can dual pump, right? But what we don't want to do is if these pumps are operating in a series, we wouldn't want engine 2 to flow attack lines. Why not? Because they're in RPM mode. Yes. So this is our relay engine. This apparatus is operating in pressure mode. Our source and any relay engines that we have are going to operate in RPM. Agreed? So we would not want this engine to flow attack lines because they're not operating in pressure mode. We can't do it safely. We have to flow in pressure mode if we're operating attack lines for the safety of the firefighters operating. and so that we have effective streams. Agreed? But if we were to, let's say, split our supply here, and then engine 4 comes up and they want to flow, that's okay, right? We didn't violate our rule because we're taking one pipeline and we're turning it into two. Okay, so each pipeline has its own attack engine. Make sense? Y'all remember that? Questions? Okay. Let's say when we get set up, at some point you're on the relay or the source and you're like, I am supposed to be in RPM mode and I've been operating in pressure mode for the last 5 minutes. What can we do to fix that?
Switch it.
Just switch it. How do we do that?
Hold it.
Hold it. Just hold the button down, right? And it will switch, and it will go to RPM mode, and it will just maintain whatever engine speed you have at that point. We remember from hydraulics that the reason we want to be in RPM mode is so that the governors are not out of sync with each other, right? They're not really fighting each other. They're trying to cooperate. They're trying to work together. But because of those distances involved in the lag time between one governor picking up what the other one's doing, they get out of sync, right? And so then you get that seesaw effect with your pressures. Remember that? Okay. When we're getting set up, if we imagine, let's just imagine that engine 3 reverse laid out to this hydrant. It is critically important that we get a really good kink-free spot to that hydrant. Okay, that is absolutely critical, because if we have a big 90-degree bend in our 5-inch and we effectively turn that 5-inch into a 3-inch, right, because we have a kink in the line, that's going to negatively impact what we can do. Agreed? So take the time to get it right. Understand that if we're at a defensive fire, we're flowing big volumes, this is going to be a very long duration fire. We've got the time to get it right. Okay, if that means that you need to get a firefighter on a headset and you need to back up or you need to move forward, take the time to do it. If you get set up with let's say you're able to get set up to the hydrant, you think you've got a good spot, and you charge the 5-inch pony section and it's got that dreaded slinky kink where it's too compressed and you've got a kink here and a kink in the other part of your S. Is it permissible to put it back in road gear and maybe pull forward a little bit to decompress that S? It's up to you and your officer. Okay, if it's me, if you're working with me, I'll call it good. We can make an adjustment like that as long as we're being very deliberate with what we do. Okay, but we need to have a good kink-free spot. Do we need to have a manifold between the hydrant and the engine? We don't. Can we? We can't. Right? Manifold is not mandatory. Do we have to have a manifold anywhere in this lake? We don't. We frequently do because of the way that we operate. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying don't do it. But most of us are in the habit of having a manifold right there behind the attack engine, right? As the driver of that attack engine, it's just part of our programming. We put the manifold down. It also provides a nice target, right, for the people bringing us the 5-inch, or when somebody lays out, like, hey, connect here, and we'll take care of the rest of it. Understand, though, that when we're moving large volumes of water, that those flows introduce a lot of energy and a lot of turbulence that can create problems that we're not accustomed to seeing. Do y'all remember talking about that when we're moving a lot? If you look head on at one of our manifolds, it's a 4-inch waterway, okay, and it's controlled by a 1/4 turn ball valve. If you can find another appliance in AFD's fleet where we have a 4-inch waterway controlled by a 1/4 turn ball valve, then I owe you a beer. Okay, that's the only time. NFPA says when we get above 3 inches, it has to be a slow acting valve to prevent what? Water hammer, right? We don't want to just crank those things open and shut really quickly. The problem is that these are not ball bearings for NASA, right? They're never perfectly calibrated. So you're going to have a little sliver of that valve body that's going to be exposed. And when we start to get up into, let's say, 15, 16, 1700 gallons per minute, there's a lot of turbulence in that line. Today, watch the 5-inch. It'll be vibrating when we start to move a lot of water. That's normal. But all that turbulence can start to work that valve kind of gradually toward a closed position until it catches enough of it, and then it slams it shut. Okay, so it hits that little inflection point, and then wham, it closes it. So as long as we understand that that's a risk, right, that that's a choke point, if you want to use a manifold, fine. I highly recommend, if you're moving a large volume of water, secure it in an open position. Okay, use a hose strap, use webbing, whatever you can do. You don't have to have it cinched down so tight that the valve won't move. You just want it enough that you can catch it if it starts to slam. Questions? Luis, you have something?
I have a question, but the newer manifolds, I won't say all of them we have now, but if you look, it actually has a number stamped on it. I'll show you when we get up there. Maximum GPM, 1361. That's max. So if we're doing this, we're probably going on that. So we'll start getting into trouble, whatever that means.
In a perfect world, I would rather not have a manifold at all if I'm going to be doing a big water operation. If we're relay pumping for distance and it's like, hey, we've got like less than 1,000 gallons per minute, a manifold's not going to be a problem. Okay, it's when we get up into the higher flows. Agreed? Cool. All right. So good kink-free spot, taking the time to get it right. If you're the driver of this engine, you're going to have to make a decision, depending on where the hydrant is, of how you're going to connect. Okay, in a perfect world, I can stick that landing with a 25-foot section of 5-inch, just a direct connect. That has the advantage of making this very simple, right? Doesn't take up a lot of space. It also allows me a little bit of wiggle room with my discharge side, because one of the first things I need to do once I've laid 5-inch out is break the coupling at the hose bed, right? Or pull 5-inch until I find the coupling, break it, and I need to connect it to my discharge, right? But what happens if I'm pulling it up and I'm like 10 feet short from my discharge? The key thing is I've got a good spot, right? I don't want to sacrifice my spot. So if I have an extra 25-foot section, right, I can splice my gap. Otherwise, I've got to pull another 100 feet. And then I have to manage that, right? We don't want to block the roadway or impede ingress and egress. But sometimes you're going to have to use two 25-foot pony sections to stick it. Maybe there are vehicles in the way. Maybe that hydrant is set back farther than it should be. Maybe it's turned the other way, and we've got to create a bend to change it 180 degrees. So if that's what's going on, that's what's going on. You've got to do the best that you can, but hopefully you're going to be able to make that connection without having to pull another 100 feet. Okay, so just something to think about. If you determine that you need a relay engine, get on the radio and say it, right? We can have an engine pull in, break the 5-inch, insert themselves into the lay as a relay engine if we determine that there's a need. We just need to be clear in communicating that on the radio. Understand that as the driver, you may be that person making that radio communication. Okay? All right. So as we're making connections, we are going to open our hydrant. We're going to get a static pressure from our hydrant. If we're not using a manifold, we don't have the manifold to get the static off of, so we're going to get the static once it reaches our intake, right? Get our static. We're going to be very deliberate about communicating, hey, engine 2 driver, this is engine 3 driver, are you ready for water? Okay. Affirmative, I'm ready for water, go ahead and send it. We want to make sure that we're not just blindly sending water. When we get that okay, we're going to open up our large diameter discharge at idle. Okay. This is different from when we're on the attack engine and we over pump to 150 and then we set our attack lines off of that, right? We charge our attack lines with a master discharge pressure of 150, and then we gate them back to set our flow pressures. We all remember that. So when we're doing supply lines in a relay, we don't charge them, we fill them. Okay, we stay at idle, and we just let hydrant pressure push that water through. Okay, and we're going to open it up nice and slowly at first, let it fill, right? As you see that line sort of get fatter and fuller, we can open it up all the way. And we want it all the way open. We're not gating back on our large diameter discharge. We are going to use our throttle and our throttle alone to manipulate the pressure on that line. Okay, so we open up our discharge all the way, and it's going to fill to the intake of engine 2. Okay, if I'm engine 3's driver and I'm looking at my discharge gauge and I'm looking at my intake, as I do that, as I'm filling that line, what is my intake gauge doing? It's dipping, right? Because we're moving water. We're using some of that stored potential energy to move water, so it's going to dip. Okay, what is my discharge gauge going to look like? Yeah, initially it's going to be low, right? And then I open it up, and it's going to, it's going to drop, and then as it fills up, it's going to build towards basically hydrant pressure plus whatever amount of pressure my impeller at idle is adding to it. Okay, and your impeller, even at idle, is still spinning. It's going to add around 40 to 45 psi of pressure. Okay, the reason I bring that up is because depending on how many relay engines we have, right, every time an engine opens up their discharge to fill the next section of the pipeline, everybody upstream is going to see a dip, right? Their intake's going to dip, their discharge is going to be low, or it's going to dip, and then when it fills up, it's going to come back up to what we expect it to be. So what we don't want to do is not pay attention, and then we see it dip, and we're like, oh, I need to juice the pressure on this line. Right? We don't need to juice the pressure. We're just letting the line fill until it gets to the attack engine. Everybody clear on that? Also understand that by the time, before we start flowing water, right, by the time this gets to the relay engine, let's say that our static hydrant pressure is 60 psi. Let's say we have a pretty good sized main. Our static pressure is 60. So engine 3 is going to add about, let's say, 45 psi to that 60 psi. So by the time it gets to the intake of engine 2, they're going to see what? Like 105 psi, right? And then they're going to open it up, and by the time it gets to engine 1, it's going to add about the impeller of engine 2 is going to add about another 45. So they're looking at about 150, right? So by the time that gets to engine 1's intake, you might have 150 psi static, right? It's not static because they're not attached to the hydrant, but their intake pressure is 150. Understand that there's nothing wrong. Once we start flowing water, it's going to drop, right? That's just water that's not moving, okay? We can get some really hot hydrants that are like 100 psi static. So by the time it gets to engine 1, you might have the pop-off valve on your intake start to go. It's dumping pressure. That doesn't mean it's charged too hot. It just means we're not moving water, okay? Any questions about that? Good. Once engine 1 has a hydrant supply or has that water supply established, they're going to start flowing attack lines. Engine 1's job's what you understand it to be already as far as managing multiple lines, with the caveat that you've really got to pay attention to your intake pressure, okay? This entire system here, its purpose is to maintain that floor underneath what they're trying to do. And as we bring more lines into play and we're moving more water, we've got to give these folks back here a chance to catch up to what we're doing, okay? And we'll talk about troubleshooting here in a little bit. So engine 1's going to start flowing lines. Engines 3 and engine 2, or engines 3 and 2, are going to be paying attention. They are going to be glued to their panels because you are basically a human pressure governor. It's not going to do it for you. You're going to be watching all your gauges, okay? Constantly scanning your gauges because we don't want to create any choke points here, okay? As a starting point, we want to maintain a discharge pressure of about 100 psi on that 5-inch, okay? That's our starting point. And that, we're going to say about plus or minus a cushion of, say, around 25 psi on either side of that. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that if it drops to 80, you're not allowed to touch your throttle, okay? Doesn't mean that. If it drops to 80, by all means, go build that throttle back up to 100. What it does mean is if it drops below, let's say it drops to 70, I need to be a little more aggressive in getting that pressure built back up, okay? So let it be an indicator for how aggressive you need to be. If it goes above, let's say that it goes up to 130 because a line gets shut down, a firefighter shuts a bail, and your discharge pressure on that line is 130. Does that mean you need to decrease your throttle to get it back down to 100? No, you're fine. Let it ride, right? Just use your common sense, especially if we know that this scene is still escalating and we're going to flow more water. If I'm going to err to one side or the other, I'm going to front load a little bit of pressure because the person downstream only has enough of the pie that I give them, right? So they only have that to work with. So I'm going to give them as much as I can give them, right? And then we adjust as necessary. Does that make sense? All right. So as pressure fluctuations occur here and as pressure fluctuations occur here, the governor of engine 1 is going to make adjustments. That's going to cause changes on our gauges, and we're just going to watch, and we're going to be very smooth, right? We're going to be very cool, channel our inner Fonzies, right? Fonzie's cool. Anybody see Pulp Fiction? Am I just old? God. All right. That's your assignment for tonight. Watch Pulp Fiction. It's a good movie. So we're gonna be very smooth in our adjustments, okay? And we're just gonna try to maintain that 100. If in a perfect world, let's say everyone's at the same elevation and it's 500 feet between engines, things are probably going to be pretty consistent, but we don't live in a perfect world. We may have an elevation change. We may have 600 feet with one engine, 400 feet with another, or something along those lines. So the amount of work required to overcome pressure loss between any given, any two nodes, it may be different, right? So all that is to say, if I'm on engine 1 and I'm opening up a ramp and I don't have enough intake pressure to support that, just ask for more pressure, okay? And who do I want to ask? I'm just gonna, there's no one right or wrong answer. I have my preference, but do I want to ask this person or this person? Source. Okay, I'm hearing source. Why do we say source?
They have the closest tangible reading of the static and what residual they are giving.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I like where you're going with that. But what if engine 2 is just not delivering what they're getting? Okay, so for that reason, my preference would be I'm going to ask the engine immediately upstream of me. I need more pressure. They can look at their gauges and maybe they're kind of fixated on that 100 psi, but we're up to like 1,500 gallons per minute, right? And all of that pressure is getting lost between their discharge and your intake. It may just take that driver going, oh, we're moving a lot of water. I need to up the throttle. And now they're no longer a choke point in the system, okay? But let's say that they're not getting enough from the source engine. They can get on the radio and say, hey, engine 3 driver from engine 2 driver, can you give me more pressure? Roger that. And then they can juice the throttle. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
And so if we're engine 1 attack and we get to the point where command is asking for another big apparatus or appliance, we need a flow master stream. Do you have the capability for that? And so engine 1 needs to have that residual to look at the chart and see how much they have.
Yeah.
Are they asking relay or source?
Good question. Okay, so the question is, command, and I'm doing this for the benefit of our video. Question is, command calls engine 1, asks for a RAM, let's say. Can you give me a RAM? and engine one's driver correctly surmises that they need to get a residual pressure for the hydrant. Do they ask engine two's driver for that, or do they ask engine three's driver for that? And why engine three? Yes. Yeah, so it needs to come from engine three. Engine three has a static and a residual pressure. They are the ones that have the true static and residual. Everybody else just has an intake pressure, right? And that's probably the most common mistake with relay pumping, is that the TAC driver is looking at their intake gauge and they mistake that for a residual, right? So I'm going to be, today, as we're doing this, you're probably going to hear me get on the radio and get real persnickety about terminology. And if you're on the attack engine and you're referring to a residual pressure, I'm going to get on there and say, is that a residual pressure or is that an intake pressure? I'm not just trying to be nitpicky. I just want to make sure that we're clear about what's happening in that system. Okay, it's a good question. So yes, any data for calculating whether or not I can flow additional water needs to come from this driver here. But if I'm asking for more pressure, I'm going to ask the apparatus immediately upstream. Okay. Right now, these are in my drawing. It looks like they're right next to each other, and they're engines 1, 2, and 3. But you may be a relief driver working overtime in another part of town and have no idea. Like, man, I can't remember what the other engines are in this relay. Is there anything wrong with just using your functional designation? Hey, source engine driver from attack engine driver, what's my residual pressure? Right? Everybody on the scene knows what's happening there, right? So if you need to, it's totally okay to just call the other drivers by their function, right? Relay engine driver from source driver, but make sure you're using the term driver. This is another thing that I'm going to get nitpicky on the radio. You are engine one driver. You are attack engine driver. You are not engine one. Engine one is off fighting fire somewhere, right? So if I hear you on the radio and you're like, hey, engine one, this is engine two, are you ready for water? You're likely to hear me get on the radio and go, hey, this is engine one. We're on Charlie's side, fighting fire. Did somebody have traffic for me? And I'm going to want you to repeat that traffic, okay? Just to keep it straight, because it can cause confusion. Okay, so we are just making adjustments as necessary. I think hopefully it's clear by now that as we set that relay up, we are starting from our source and building toward our point of attack, right? It just progresses in that direction. As we get above, let's say 1,300 gallons per minute, we need to understand that we're going to have to go higher than 100 psi. Right? If you have the time and you're curious about it, you can get your pump chart out, look on that back side of the first page, and look at pressure loss, right? Or friction, the chart for friction loss, and you can get a sense of how much you've got to juice that throttle, okay, to overcome that pressure loss. Some of the numbers to keep in mind, and I'll write them down here. Real critical one, what do we not want to go below at the hydrant? 20 psi. Anyone remember why that is? Prevents backflow into the municipal water system, right? Does not mean that if we drop to 15 psi, the water main is going to implode, right? Everything's going to go to hell. It's just that is an operational safety factor for domestic water supplies. We don't want any backflow into the system, okay? So hydrant minimum pressures. Hydrant, we want no less than 20 psi. Okay. If we are at any of these other engines, a good rule of thumb is to maintain 50 psi at your intake. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a hard deck that if you go below it, you're going to start to see things fall apart. But a best practice is for intake pressures If we can keep them above 50 psi, that's great. Understand that at higher flows, probably not going to be able to do that, right? If we're losing 100 psi plus just in pressure loss between engines, man, you're probably going to be looking at maybe 20, 30, right, at high flows on your intake. That's okay, right? So if you're flowing a lot of water and you're not getting that 50, don't anchor on that, okay? Understand that we're going to lose a lot of pressure. What about, let's say max PSI. We want to, what is the max we want to go on our 5-inch? 180. Is that because it's gonna burst above 180? It's an operational safety, right? We don't want to go above 180. Hopefully our pop-off valves are all set to 175 or 180. Okay. Little sidebar. I've noticed a lot of them coming from the factory are set at 150. And so if you're going above 150, you're going to start to see your pop-off valve going. You can adjust that, right? If you've got that little stepped pattern. Have y'all seen how you can adjust your intakes, the pop-off valves on the intakes? Most of our intakes now are field adjustable with the stamped numbers on that stepped pattern. And you can adjust it in the field, right, with an Allen wrench or an adjustable wrench. Everybody understand that? Another one that's going to get some attention is master discharge pressure. If it's above 150 psi, I don't want to be confusing with this. It's a great idea to ask for a water supply group supervisor. Okay. I saw in some notes there was something that said don't let it get above 150. Do not exceed 150 psi on your master discharge pressure. That's not true. We can exceed that. In fact, at high flows, we're likely to do so. Once you'll see it today, you might be trying to maintain 100 psi on your 5-inch, and if you look at your gauge for your 5-inch, it's about where you want it. And then you look at your master discharge gauge, and it's going to be like 160. So it's 160 here, and it's 100 here, and your discharge is wide open. Okay, that's normal. That's not a problem. Understand that one gauge reads the churn pressure in the pump. The other gauge is actually reading the flow on that line. That water's all coming through a restricted waterway. And so it's as though we've gated it back, right? And that's what our flow pressure is on that line, okay? But if you are on this engine, okay, if you're the source engine, and you are looking at your master discharge gauge and you see that it's 150 psi or more, this is not an operational requirement. It's just a best practice to notify command or your division or group supervisor and let them know, hey, we're about 150 psi on our master discharge. I recommend we get a water supply group supervisor. All that is a proactive step that we can take to kind of get out ahead of any potential water supply problems. Luis? Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it's not true.
Yeah. It's not a do not exceed. It's just a.
Yes, and also that was his trigger to request a water supply group supervisor. Ask me how many times I've seen that in real life. Basically.
Yeah. In reality, what are going to be the things that are going to sort of trigger that need for a water supply group supervisor? What do y'all think?
If it's a fire, you're gonna have to set up multiple operations.
Complexity of the operation. Okay. To me, that's the trigger point.
His
Right.
concern was that if you're at 150 or you get to 150 and they shut something down, deck gun, ram, a big gun, something like that, you shut it down all of a sudden, where's that pressure going to? It's going back, right? So his concern was that that pressure is going to build up like way higher than 180 psi.
battery, right? We're gonna bust, we have relief valves on the intakes, we have relief valves on the manifolds. And as we learn, that's not gonna happen. Aren't we talking about the shattered underground and stuff like that?
We're about to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's where the long term comes from.
Yeah.
It's not gonna die if you go over 100 feet.
And I will tell you right now, I'm this is a rule of thumb, but if I'm in your shoes and I'm operating, the source engine on the relay, what's much more important to me is that I'm hearing, oh, we're about to flow an aerial over there. Hey, we've got another engine attaching to a hydrant over here. I'm not sure if these are looped mains or these are separate water mains. I'm just hearing a lot of stuff happening from a water supply perspective. This is getting complicated. And if we are on a looped main, whatever's happening elsewhere is going to affect me, right? So probably a good idea to get somebody at an officer level involved in troubleshooting that so we can get out ahead of it, okay? So just understand, you can make that request. If you're a driver and you're just hearing all this traffic, your officer's off fighting fire, right? They've got a whole other set of tactical objectives that they're thinking about. You are thinking about the logistical objectives of water supply as that driver. So don't be shy. Get on the radio and ask for it. They can always say no. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some troubleshooting things that might take place while we're going here. One of the things, obviously, we're all familiar with not having enough pressure. Okay, we don't have enough pressure at our intake. Okay, ask for more, right? Ask for more pressure. Let that request get relayed down the line towards the source until it gets corrected. Okay, something we're not accustomed to seeing, but that we will see likely today is a pressure surge. It's when it goes up, and that can cause problems for us too. So the example that Luis was just bringing up was, let's say we're flowing 1,500 gallons per minute, okay, and one of those appliances or one of the devices we're flowing is a ram. Okay, if you remember from the academy, it's the only time that a firefighter not controlling the pump is in direct control of 500 gallons per minute worth of flow because it's got its own bail, right? It's very portable. It's a wonderful little tool. I can knock down fire in this bay, and then I can shut it down, pick it up, move it over, fight fire in the next bay, right? But that's a lot of water. So if let's say that we're rocking and rolling, and I decide I don't want to be here, I want to be there, and I just shut the ram down without letting my driver know. When that happens, my demand for water just got cut, right? So now we're flowing 1,000 instead of 1,500. And to Luis's point, where does that all go? It goes back. Now, it's not necessarily going to cause a water hammer situation because we do have safeties across that chain, across that pipeline, where we're gonna dump that excess pressure. But when you're operating in RPM mode, your governor is programmed to idle itself, to go to idle when it perceives a major pressure surge in a short amount of time. Okay?
30 seconds. I'm sorry. 30 psi in 3 seconds. That's what the NFPA says.
Yes, 30 psi in 3 seconds. So it's not necessarily the amount of rise, it's the rate of rise, right? If everything's happening very slowly and it just creeps up to 30 over the span of like 30 seconds, fine, no problem. But if it sees a spike, like somebody shuts something down, it spikes 30 psi, it's just going to go to idle. So if I'm operating in RPM mode and I hear a change in my engine speed and I didn't do it, that is my first indication, right? I need to check my governor and my gauges. Remember that from troubleshooting? If I hear my engine do something that I didn't expect it to do, doesn't mean there's a problem, but I definitely need to check my gauges and just make sure everything's okay. What that's going to look like is your engine's going to go to idle. The light, the RPM light, is going to start to blink red. It's going to blink red, okay? All you need to do is acknowledge the alarm or the indicator by manipulating your throttle. So up or down arrow, or turn your wheel to the left or right. That light's going to disappear. And then assess where you need to be and make adjustments as necessary. Okay? This happens sometimes where a driver is so in tune, they're dialed into what's going on, and as people shut something down, they automatically start making adjustments, and they run right through it. Like the pressure surge occurs, it still goes to idle, but because they're paying attention and they're doing it, they don't even notice. Okay, that's fine. But let's take that same scenario. Let's say that firefighter shuts the ram down, causes a pressure surge, right? The governors on engine 2 and possibly engine 3 go to idle, but we have good hydrant pressure. And with hydrant pressure and the idle impellers, it's still okay, right? But then that firefighter goes to the next bay and cranks open the ram again. What's going to happen? Everything's going to tank, right? So it's important to make sure that we're in tune with that, so that when that firefighter opens the ram again, we can make the necessary adjustments. This is a good opportunity to have a conversation with your crews, your young firefighters out there, and ourselves, right? If we're opening or closing big lines, we need to let people know, right? The driver of engine 1, if they're going to supply an aerial, if they're going to flow a deck gun, if they're going to charge the ram, it's a good idea just to let the relay know, hey, we're opening up the ram. Hey, we're shutting down the ram. It just lets everyone take proactive steps to adjust for that. Okay. You don't need to do that for a rack line, a bundle, a 2.5-inch. You don't need to call it out for every line. Okay, but do call out the big guns.
Basically, it looks like 500 GPMs about which means you have 4 rack lines flowing, but 600 lines. What are the chances they're all gonna close at the same time? Not very good. Like Mike was saying, a ram will do, a techno will do.
Yeah. To that point, another thing that can happen, let's imagine you're on the attack engine. We'll start to see errors that can happen at any time, but they're more common in big water operations. So the RPM limit, remember we talked about that. Yep. If you don't remember, that's okay, raise your hand. Remember that? So just to review, an RPM limit, that occurs when the governor, which is operating in pressure mode, it attempts to increase the engine speed because the discharge pressure drops, right? So, hey, I open up a rack line, discharge pressure drops, the governor picks that up and it says, I'm going to increase the engine speed to get it back up to 150, all is well, okay? If the governor attempts to increase the engine speed to maintain the pressure and it doesn't rise, that is an indicator that we don't have enough water to do what we're trying to do. So it's like a threatened cavitation, okay? It's like, hey, you're trying to do too much. You don't have enough of a floor underneath you, so I'm going to cap your engine speed until you fix this. I'm going to limit your RPMs. It's an RPM limit. You're going to see it on the display on your governor. You're also going to, what you're going to notice is that your RPMs are not going to be rising, right? And if you look at your pressures across the board, they're all going to start dropping, okay? It's not going to go to idle. It's not going to just shut down the operation, but your streams are going to look really crummy. That is an indicator that it's not necessarily that you can't do it, but you need to give your relay a chance to catch up to you. Does that make sense? Most of the time when I see an RPM limit, it's not because we miscalculated what we can do water-wise. It's because we're opening up that big gun too quickly, okay? So all you need to do is just slow down. You may just need to if you're opening up that ram, and you're starting to see your intake pressure drop, and maybe you get an RPM limit, just slow down. Maybe gate back on it just a little bit. What I don't want you to do is to start trying to do it. You start to see an RPM limit, and you're like, oh, that's not going to work, and then you just shut it down to let your relay catch up. Because what do you think happens then? the pressure surge gets sent back, it idles everybody's engine, and now we have to really start back from square one. If it happens, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But usually all we have to do is just slow our roll a little bit and open it up more slowly. Watch our intake gauge. Okay, I see the relays catching up. Open it up a little more. Okay, they're good. And then we can flow what we want to flow. Agreed? All right. What else? What other troubleshooting issues? Yeah, if we miscalculate, right? Command wants to know, can you do a RAM? I do the calculation. I'm off the chart, right? I give my best guess. And when we try to do it, it's just not working. No harm, no foul, right? Just let command know that you can't give them the RAM. If you need to close the RAM back, that's fine. Let command make the decision about what they want. If they still want the RAM, just let them know I've got to shut another line down in order to give you that. Okay, command can make that determination. And understand that the more, kind of alluded to this already, the more complex the operation gets, the more that's going to affect our hydrant pressures, right? So the calculation that was accurate 5 minutes ago might not be accurate still once we're setting up to flow an aerial and we've got another engine protecting exposures and attached to a hydrant on the other, one street over. Okay, so we may have to recalculate. It really helps if we have a water supply group supervisor that can do the calculation for the whole scene if it's on a looped main, and then they can start rationing flow between the different engines. Okay. Questions? Remember that our pumps are rated to 1,500 gallons per minute. That does not mean they max out at 1,500 gallons per minute. They are rated at 1,500 gallons per minute at draft with a master discharge pressure of 150. If we have a pressurized source, aka a hydrant, then we can flow more. Anybody remember where we're going to top out? With our 1,500 GPM single stage impellers that we spec out for AFD. In terms of flow, it's about 2,300 gallons per minute, give or take. Some units can do more, some less, but 2,300 gallons per minute is about where they're going to top out. If you do the calculation at Pleasant Valley, and it tells you can do 3,500 gallons per minute, right? Your calculation is probably not wrong. You're probably correct. We just don't have the equipment that will flow that amount of water, okay? All right. Shutting down. When we started this thing up, we started here, and we built toward our attack engine. When we shut down, the attack engine driver is going to be in charge of that operation, okay? And we're just going to work from the attack back to our source. There's no one right way to do this, okay? The main thing is that we do this slowly and methodically. We're communicating when we shut down big lines. A good practice is to keep a big line flowing while you are shutting down. It provides a place for that extra pressure to be dissipated as we shut lines down, and it prevents those back surges, right? So whether it's a RAM or a DET gun, those are two excellent options. We just keep that flowing while we shut our other lines down, okay? Your firefighters on the lines are probably going to start shutting the bales anyway, so you can take your smaller hand lines down. If you're shutting down something like a RAM or a DET gun, let your relay know so that they can back off on the pressure accordingly, okay? If you want to, during this time, if it's a defensive fire, you don't have people operating in an LDLH or an IDLH, LDLH, thinking large diameter lines here. In an IDLH, if you want to back off on your throttle a little bit as you shut it down while you're taking lines down, it's fine. Just make sure that you're managing the changes so that they're happening slowly so everybody can keep up. Does that make sense? Once we are at idle here and we just have our DET gun flowing at idle pressure, we can shut the deck gun down. Okay, as this driver starts to shut lines down and or throttle down, what are the pressures doing here if we're watching our gauges? If we're watching our discharge gauge, they're going up, right? Because we're using less water, and so we're getting that pressure is kind of stacking up. So what are these drivers doing? They're just decreasing their throttle to stay in sync. So when this engine is at idle, odds are these engines are at idle too. Okay, everybody's at idle. Now we can close the deck gun, and then we can shut the operation down. Just like we want to make sure that we are ready for water, but we check with the downstream engine, we're ready for water before we send it. We do not want to be closing discharges or breaking connections until we've confirmed that their discharges are closed. Does that make sense? So, hey, engine 2 driver from engine 1 driver, I'm at idle. I've got my intake closed. You can shut down your discharge. And then maybe get a little clarification, making sure that their discharge is closed, and then you can start bleeding off the pressure and breaking connections. Okay? Just take your time. We're not in a rush. What am I? Oh, this is gone. Got bored. Questions? Yes, sir.
At what point would you want or need a relay engine in between source and the attack?
Okay.
Just work like super long lay, or even like
Depends on the application, right? So there's a rule of thumb there on your pump chart where it talks about relay pumping and the distance between engines, right? So if we're the number it uses, the breakover point is 1,250 gallons per minute. Don't get too fixated upon that exact number. What I ask myself is, are we relay pumping because it's a standard room and contents fire, or it's like a Tesla that's got a battery fire at the end of a long driveway, and we just need to maintain a steady water flow, but it's less than it's a low water flow. Maybe we're flowing a couple of rack lines, 300 gallons per minute, right? So am I just trying to maintain a flow over distance, or do we need a lot of water, right? Do we need a big water supply operation? That's really the question that I'm asking myself. So if it's just a small amount of water over distance for the Tesla that's burning, 1,000 feet is fine, right? You can drop your whole hose bed, you're probably going to be fine. If it is a defensive fire at a lumber yard, no more than 500 feet. Okay, you'll want a relay engine if your hydrant is distant. If you get it set up and it's just a 2-engine relay and you realize this is not working, can you shut it down very briefly and get an engine into that relay? Sure, it's going to take a little bit of time, okay, but we can make that happen. There are ways that we can train and be efficient and make that happen quickly. That's the question I ask myself. Right? Am I relay pumping for flow, or am I relay pumping for distance? Other questions? Okay. Real quickly, question sometimes comes up: how does what we're talking about differ from what we're going to do when we test? When you come back and you test with your partner, you're going to do some type of relay operation, maybe more than one. Okay, it'll be a 2-engine relay, just a source and an attack engine, right? Still a relay, right? Just as if I put engines 4, engine 5, engine 6, engine 7, if I put them and I put 5 relay engines, it's still a relay. When you come back to test, it's going to be like a live dress rehearsal for a fire. Okay, so that means there's going to be radio traffic. It's going to simulate the radio traffic at an actual fire. There will be a person whose sole job is there just to dispatch and create radio traffic, so that you're having to get out and you're having to respond to commands and questions. So understand that you're going to have to talk on the radio. You're going to have to manage expectations of people who need things from you that you may not be able to deliver. Okay, when you get set up, you're going to be laying 5-inch. Okay, so you're going to be determining, this will kind of be laid out for you, but you're going to be doing maybe a split lay. Maybe you're going to do a reverse lay. So you're going to be kind of starting from scratch as though you're at an actual fire. Okay. Today, the 5-inch is going to be preset, and we're going to be just rotating between stations just so that we can get reps. Cool. Other questions? All right, so that, just bird's eye view. I think Lieutenant Ratoza already covered it, but there will be 3 engines. You're probably not going to be in line of sight, so you'll get an opportunity to, use your radios, talk to each other. We'll rotate forward. So wherever you start, as you rotate, you're going to go up. And if you're at the attack, you'll just go walk over to source, switch positions so that everybody gets an opportunity to get hands-on at least once. But do talk to each other, work through problems together, ask questions. You're going to have an instructor there that's going to help you out and make sure that we're getting it done correctly. If there's every now and then we run into an issue that we're not anticipating, it never fails, where it's not your fault, okay? And something's going on, like we have an apparatus that has a mechanical failure or something like that. We'll get it figured out, okay? But if there are no additional questions, we'll take a break, go to the bathroom, get water, and divide yourself up into groups of 3. Is it 9 of us? 9 of y'all? And just pick a spot. We have the source engine is over there near the CrossFit. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's over there. Everything should be set up. There's extra 5-inch if you need more, like you let me know.
Okay. No, that's good.
It's about 600-ish.
Okay. So that'll limit us a little bit. We're not going to get way up to like 2,000 gallons per minute, but that's fine. Okay. This is more like the real world, right? Real quick, maximizing a hydrant. Anybody know how much more you get flow-wise when you maximize a hydrant? It's pretty good. You get about 10 to 15% more potential flow when you maximize by bringing that extra stick of 5-inch. Do we dress the hydrant to maximize it before we send water? Yes. Do we actually have to pull the 5-inch and maximize it before we send water? No. So yes, you can get a little bit more water. Do not delay sending water if you're the source engine in order to maximize the hydrant. Okay. Do hold on to your firefighter if they're there helping you. If you know you want to maximize it, put them to work before they get to go and do hero stuff. Right? Put them to work. Get them to connect your 5-inch if you choose to maximize the hydrant. Okay? I think that's all the points I've got. Clear as mud. A lot of stuff to throw at you. Thanks for staying awake. Y'all have got my number. So as you're practicing this with your partners, with your crews, any questions come up, you call me anytime, even if I'm not at work. Okay, you just call me on my personal cell. You've all got it. Please call, ask. We'll get after it. Cool. All right. See you out there in about, let's say, 10 minutes.